On Malachor, the ancient temple shook as Ahsoka Tano faced Darth Vader in the dark. This time, there was no escape, no last-second rescue, and no path back into the shadows. Vader came at her with brutal force, driving her across broken stone. But Ahsoka fought with the speed and pain of someone who had already lost too much. She remembered the Clone Wars. She remembered the boy who had believed in her when others did not. And when Vader's blade hammered down again, Ahsoka stopped defending. She chose to end it. With one sharp turn, she trapped his lightsaber. With the other blade, she struck straight through his chest plate. The Dark Lord staggered. His mask cracked. His breathing failed. Then, for one terrible second, she saw his face. Anakin. The name hit harder than any weapon. Ahsoka dropped to her knees as Vader collapsed before her. His yellow eyes faded, and behind the ruin of the mask, there was only a broken man. He tried to speak. Maybe it was her name. Maybe it was an apology. But the words never came. Then the temple groaned. Far across the stars, Darth Sidious felt it. His greatest weapon was gone. His rage turned at once toward the one who had done it. On Malachor, the Force itself seemed to scream around Ahsoka. She had not destroyed a monster. She had killed her master. As the Sith temple began to fall apart, Ahsoka lifted Anakin's saber with shaking hands. Grief, guilt, and fear crashed over her all at once. She had won the battle, but in that victory, she had unleashed something far worse. And somewhere in the darkness, the Emperor was already coming. And when he arrived, the galaxy would pay for Anakin Skywalker's death in fire, blood, and fear. Sidious felt Vader die the instant Ahsoka's blade pierced his chest. In the black heart of Coruscant, the Emperor rose from his throne and let the shock turn into fury. For years, Vader had been his fist, his hunter, his living symbol of fear. Now that symbol was gone, destroyed by the one apprentice Anakin had failed to break. On Malachor, Ahsoka barely escaped the collapsing temple. She carried two things with her: Vader's lightsaber and the truth she could never unlearn. Anakin Skywalker had lived inside that mask until the very end. She had not saved him. She had killed him. That grief followed her into hyperspace like a ghost. But Sidious did not waste time mourning. He sent inquisitors, probe droids, and Imperial agents across the Outer Rim. Every rebel cell was watched. Every rumor of a Togruta warrior was hunted. He wanted Ahsoka alive, if possible, broken if necessary, dead if required. "Bring me the Apprentice," he ordered, his voice cold as a tomb. "She will answer for this." The search sent panic through the rebellion. Bail Organa moved safe houses. Hera pulled ghost missions off major routes. Rex warned old allies to vanish. Ahsoka wanted to disappear, but the Emperor's shadow kept spreading. Wherever she hid, worlds suffered. Civilians were arrested. Informants were tortured. Entire towns burned under Imperial suspicion. That was the trap. Sidious knew Ahsoka still cared. He knew guilt could pull harder than chains. So he turned the hunt into a message: step out, or others will die in your place. At last, Ahsoka stopped running. She stood inside a ruined outpost, staring at the stolen lightsaber in her hands. One blade had ended Vader. The next choice could start a war she was not ready to fight. Then Bail Organa sent one warning. The Emperor was no longer searching the shadows. He was closing in on the rebellion itself. Vader's death left more than an empty seat at the Emperor's side. It tore open the balance of fear that held the Empire together. Governors, admirals, and secret police chiefs all felt the change at once. The Dark Lord had been more than a weapon. He had been the threat behind every order, the shadow that kept rivals quiet. Now, that shadow was gone. Across the Imperial command structure, ambition woke up. Grand Moffs pushed for more control over their sectors. Admirals blamed intelligence failures. The Inquisitors turned on one another, each hoping to prove useful before Sidious cast them aside. Even the Emperor's closest servants began to guess the truth. If Vader could fall, then power inside the Empire was no longer fixed. Palpatine answered the chaos with terror. Executions filled the halls of Coruscant. Officers vanished after closed-door meetings. Whole fleets were reassigned overnight. But fear alone could not replace Vader. The Emperor needed a new enforcer, someone strong enough to crush rebellion, and loyal enough to never question him. That search became dangerous for the entire galaxy. Some names rose quickly. The Grand Inquisitor wanted the role. So did hidden dark side adepts buried in the Emperor's vaults. Palpatine even studied old Sith ruins, hunting for weapons, relics, and forbidden teachings that might shape a deadlier servant. Yet every path led back to the same problem. Vader had not just obeyed. He inspired fear because he was once Anakin Skywalker, a fallen legend. No stranger could fill that place. Then Sidious turned toward a different possibility. Not a servant from the past, but one from the future. On Lothal, Ahsoka felt a cold shift in the Force. The Emperor was no longer rebuilding what he had lost. He was reaching for someone new. Luke Skywalker was next. Ahsoka had killed Vader. Now she realized who would pay the price. The Emperor had chosen a new target, and the boy on Tatooine had no idea the dark side was already moving toward him. Ahsoka kept moving from safe house to safe house, but one thought followed her everywhere. Anakin Skywalker had died by her hand, and somewhere in the galaxy, his son was growing closer to the war. Bail Organa had hidden that truth for years. Now, with Vader gone, he had no choice but to tell her everything. Padme had given birth in secret. The twins had been separated. Leia was safe inside the rebellion. Luke was still hidden in plain sight on Tatooine, watched from afar until the time was right. When Bail spoke the boy's name, Ahsoka felt the Force shift again. Sidious was not only hunting a replacement for Vader, he was hunting Anakin's blood. Ahsoka wanted to go to Tatooine at once. She wanted to stand before Luke and tell him who his father had been, before the armor, before the fire, before the fall. She wanted to say that Anakin had been brave, reckless, loyal, and full of light. But she also remembered Malachor. She remembered the broken mask, the fading eyes, and the silence that came after. If Luke learned the full truth too soon, he would not hear hope. He would hear doom. So Ahsoka made a harder choice. She would guard Luke, guide him if needed, and keep Anakin's fate buried. Let the boy meet the Jedi path without carrying Vader's final shadow. Let him believe his future was still his own. But secrets like that never stay buried for long. As Imperial eyes turned toward Tatooine, Ahsoka reached the desert world too late to stop destiny from moving. Smoke rose over the Lars homestead. Jawas were already dead. And there, in the distance, a farm boy stared at two sons with a pain he could not name. While Ahsoka realized the next chapter had begun, Luke had lost the only family he had ever known. Ahsoka carried the truth that could change his life forever. And somewhere in the dark, the Emperor was already reaching for the boy Vader would never meet. Luke's path into the Force began with loss. After the murder of Owen and Beru, he left Tatooine with Obi-Wan Kenobi, carrying anger, grief, and questions he could not answer. He wanted justice. He wanted purpose. For the first time, the desert felt too small for what was coming. Obi-Wan trained him in simple ways on the trip to Alderaan. A remote droid, a helmet visor, a lesson about trust. "Your eyes can deceive you," Ben said. "Stretch out with your feelings." Luke listened, but his training was not peaceful. The war kept pulling them forward. Leia needed rescue. Stormtroopers closed in. The Death Star waited ahead like a metal moon built from fear. Without Vader, the station felt different. It was still deadly, but something was missing. There was no dark warrior stalking the halls, no shadow waiting to test Luke's blade. His first steps as a Jedi came against soldiers, officers, and impossible odds. Not the fallen father fate had chosen for him. That changed everything. Ben still gave his life so Luke and Leia could escape. Luke still heard his voice beyond death. But without Vader in the trench, the final battle unfolded faster and colder. Tarkin trusted machines and numbers. He did not understand faith. As rebel pilots died around him, Luke felt the Force guide his hands through panic. He fired. The torpedoes struck. The Death Star vanished in white fire. The rebellion cheered. Palpatine did not. From Coruscant, he felt the pilot who had destroyed his weapon. Young, strong, unbroken by failure, still unclaimed. Ahsoka felt it too. As medals were placed around Luke's neck, the Emperor fixed his gaze on Anakin's son. And in that silent moment, the war changed again, because Luke Skywalker stopped being a hope and became the Emperor's prize. Luke had taken his first step toward becoming a Jedi. But without Vader in the way, Palpatine could now reach for him directly. And the next move in this broken timeline would come from the dark side itself. After the Death Star fell, Palpatine stopped thinking of Luke Skywalker as a rebel pilot. He saw something far more valuable: raw power, Skywalker blood, and a soul not yet hardened by loss. Vader had been broken, rebuilt, and chained. Luke could be shaped earlier. He could become stronger, cleaner, and even more loyal if the Emperor struck at the right time. So Sidious changed his strategy. He did not send armies first. He sent whispers. Imperial agents spread rumors of Jedi survivors, hidden temples, and ancient weapons. Bounty hunters were paid to track Luke's friends, not kill them. Palpatine wanted pressure, not closure. He wanted the boy afraid, angry, and desperate enough to reach for strength before wisdom. On Dagobah, Yoda felt the danger growing. He warned through the Force, but Luke was still young, still impatient, still pulled by the need to protect others. Ahsoka understood the trap the moment rebel worlds began to suffer under new Imperial strikes. Every attack was designed to test Luke's heart. Save them with calm, and he might become a Jedi. Save them with rage, and the Emperor would have his opening. Then Palpatine made it personal. Through spies buried near the rebel command, he learned Leia mattered most. Orders went out in silence. Capture Organa alive. Let Skywalker come. A trap was set near Anowat, baited with stolen codes and a cry for help. Luke wanted to go at once. If we wait, they die, he said. Ahsoka heard Anakin in those words, the same courage, the same reckless love, the same road to ruin. She could not hide the truth any longer. As Luke reached for his lightsaber, Ahsoka stepped into his path. Before he faced the Emperor's trap, he would finally learn whose son he was that night. Luke thought he was racing to save Leia. Instead, he was about to face the truth Ahsoka had feared since Malachor. And once that truth was spoken, nothing in this timeline could ever be the same. Ahsoka did not let Luke board his fighter. In the dim rebel hangar, with engines humming around them, she stepped into his path and said the words she had buried since Malachor. Darth Vader was Anakin Skywalker. He was your father. And I was the one who killed him. Luke froze. For a moment, he could not speak. The name Anakin meant little to him, but Vader meant fear, death, and every story whispered through the rebellion. He looked at Ahsoka as if she had struck him. Then the harder truth landed. The monster he had heard about was not just some fallen Jedi. He was family. Ahsoka told him everything. Anakin had once been brave, loyal, and full of light. He had been Obi-Wan's student, her master, and one of the greatest heroes of the Clone Wars. But fear twisted him. Loss broke him. Sidious turned that pain into Darth Vader. There was good in him once, Ahsoka said softly. I saw it too late. Luke's anger rose fast. He wanted to blame Obi-Wan. He wanted to blame Ahsoka. He wanted to blame the father he would never meet. But beneath that anger was something worse, the fear that the same darkness lived inside him. That was the Emperor's real trap. Not chains, blood. Ahsoka saw the storm in his face and made one final choice. She gave Luke Anakin's lightsaber hilt, recovered from Malachor, and placed it in his hands. Your father fell, she said. That does not mean you will. At that moment, alarms echoed through the base. Rebel scouts had returned with terrible news. The Empire was building a second Death Star above Endor, and the Emperor himself would be there. Luke closed his hand around the saber. The final choice was coming for the entire galaxy. Luke finally knew what Vader really was. Not just a monster, not just a Sith. His father. And with the Emperor waiting at Endor, the Skywalker bloodline was racing toward its last terrible test. Endor became the point where every choice in this broken timeline finally collided. While Han, Leia, and the Rebel strike team moved toward the shield bunker, Luke surrendered himself above the forest moon, not to face his father, but to face the Emperor alone. That changed everything. There was no Vader beside the throne, no conflicted servant trapped between fear and love. Only Palpatine, waiting with a smile that promised ruin. Luke was brought into the throne room in chains, but the Emperor hardly looked at the binders. He looked at the young Skywalker with pride. Your father was powerful, he said, but you could become far more. Then he showed him the battle outside. Rebel ships burning, friends dying, hope collapsing. Palpatine wanted rage, fast and clean. But Ahsoka had come to Endor for a different war. While the fleet engaged above, she slipped through the station's lower levels, cutting past guards and dark side acolytes gathered by the Emperor after Vader's death. She knew Luke could resist temptation for a time. What he could not survive was Palpatine unchecked. So, Ahsoka fought through steel halls and firelit chambers, driving toward the throne room, with one purpose at last end, the Sith. Inside, Luke shook with anger as the Emperor pushed harder. Leia was in danger. The rebels were losing. The dark side whispered that power could save them all. His hand moved to Anakin's saber. For one awful second, Ahsoka feared she was too late. Then the doors exploded open. Ahsoka entered with blades drawn, battered and burning with resolve. Palpatine turned, furious. Lightning filled the chamber. Luke rose. Master and son of Skywalker stood together against the dark, and as the Death Star burned around them, the final battle for the galaxy began at last, without any escape. Luke could not save Vader in this timeline. So now he had to do something even harder, refuse the Emperor without the father who once turned back. And beside him, Ahsoka prepared to finish the war she started on Malachor, even if it cost her everything.